Story 1. The lonely back roads seemed to stretch endlessly through the dark, isolated countryside under a cloak of torrential rain. Jenna's windshield wipers worked furiously to clear her view as her old sedan rumbled over the wet pavement, headlights guiding the way through inky blackness. Checking her phone, there was still no cell service this far from town. She glanced nervously at the clock. Nearly midnight, and the destination shown in her rideshare app remained stubbornly blank. Accepting the late ride request had certainly been questionable judgment. As a college student, Jenna knew better than to pick up random passengers with sketchy details at such an hour, out where emergency help could be miles away. And yet, she hadn't been able to ignore the pleading voice on the other end of the call from that abandoned gas station. The woman, identifying herself only as Nora, had sounded genuinely desperate and afraid. Against her better instincts, empathy got the better of reason. Jenna shuddered at the memory of first glimpsing Nora huddled under the dim station awning, soaked to the bone in her thin sundress. Wide sapphire eyes looked frantically over her shoulder, as if at any moment some unseen horror might swoop down from the black storm clouds. When Jenna rolled down her window to ask if she was the one who requested the ride, Nora immediately ran to the car and begged to be taken away from this place, anywhere else, with no destination in mind. Alarm bells rang loudly in Jenna's head, telling her to refuse, but the distress etched on Nora's youthful features broke through her hesitation. Now, 20 minutes into the drive, Jenna began seriously questioning the wisdom of having a stranger in her car. Those azure eyes had lost none of their frenetic energy, even within the relative safety of the vehicle, darting about rapidly as Nora muttered to herself. Her thin, trembling hands fussed constantly with imagined objects in her lap, straightening non-existent wrinkles in her damp dress. Something clearly wasn't right with this girl, yet ending the ride prematurely now seemed potentially more dangerous without cell service or road signs in sight. Against her better judgment, Jenna ventured a question. "Nora, are you going to tell me what's chasing you? I need to understand what kind of trouble we could be driving into out here." The murmuring ceased as Nora turned to fix Jenna with an eerily calm stare. In a low conspiratorial tone, she whispered, "It started on the farm a few weeks back. Strange shadows around the edges of fields at night, flickering at the corners of my vision, but gone whenever I turned to look. I thought it was just tiredness playing tricks in the dark. But then, the animals began disappearing. A few chickens at first. Then, our prized milking cow was found torn to pieces one morning." Nora paused to rake fingers compulsively through her hair, as if seeking some escape within tangled blonde locks. An audible gulp could be heard before continuing. "The night Maxine died is when I first saw it clearly. I'd been having trouble sleeping, so took a lantern out to the meadow behind the barn. Something huge and shadowy detached itself from the tree line, loping toward me on all fours. I froze, the lantern slipping from my fingers and going out. But in that split second, I glimpsed an elongated snout full of gleaming teeth." Jenna felt a chill creep up her spine as the story took a grotesque turn. She opened her mouth to protest the obviously fabricated tale, but Nora rode roughshod over any skepticism. The sounds it was making. Nothing of this world could have made such noises. "Jenna, you have to believe me. I turned and ran faster than I've ever run, yet I could feel hot breath on my neck the whole way to the house. Dad's shotgun blasts in the dark told me he'd seen it too. Since then, it's been circling the property, waiting to pick us off one by one as we sleep. Nora, listen to yourself." Jenna found her voice catching in her throat. "These things you're describing, they don't add up. You must be under extreme stress, and not thinking straight. A humorless laugh escaped Nora's lips. That's what they all say. But I know what I saw, what's been following our family. You won't think I'm crazy for long. Just wait. Her head swiveled suddenly to stare out the window into inky blackness. It's out there. I can feel it watching us right now. Jenna involuntarily stomped the brake in alarm before realizing there was nothing to actually see through the downpour. Beads of sweat broke out on her forehead, despite the cool air blasting through vents. She wanted nothing more than to pull over and force Nora from the vehicle. Yet there was nowhere safe to stop in this emptiness. A long silence stretched as the rain drummed mercilessly against the Subaru, punctuated only by Nora's anxious humming under her breath. Breaking the tension, Jenna swallowed hard and slowed her rabbiting heart. We should call for help, Nora. Let me try the non-emergency line. Maybe a ranger station is closer than we think. Scooping up her phone, she pressed the home button, only to be greeted by a blank black screen. No, no. Don't do this to me now, she muttered, frantically pressing random buttons to coax some response. Nothing worked. The device was dead as a doornail. She launched a string of curses, slamming it uselessly against the dashboard in frustration. Beside her, Nora's singing grew louder, words now twisting into nonsense. Jenna shot a sidelong glance at the crazed passenger and recoiled. Dark bruises had manifested around Nora's eyes, hollowing her beautiful face into something gaunt and possessed. When had those marks appeared without notice? Those glassy blue orbs now seemed to glow with an unnatural light as Nora twisted in her seat to unleash a soul-chilling howl into the night. It's coming for us. I told you. I told you. Without warning, Nora lunged across the center console, fingers curled into talons aiming straight for Jenna's throat. Strength beyond her slight frame threw Jenna off balance, wrestling furiously to regain control of the vehicle, swerving into the opposite lane. A chorus of screams joined the wails emanating from Nora's twisted features as shadowy forms seemed to coalesce in the torrential downpour outside the windows. Jenna caught a glimpse of gaping jaws, closing in from the rearview mirror before slamming her foot down on the accelerator, willing the Subaru to fly like never before down this endless night road. Somehow, she wrested Nora's grip, loose enough to wrench the wheel right, praying blindly to hit nothing solid beyond the reach of headlights. The car fishtailed violently, but clung to asphalt, flinging Nora's writhing body back into the passenger seat. Wasting no time, Jenna smashed the electric locks down and gunned it, praying for escape from this unhinged psychotic and whatever phantoms pursued them through the darkness. Rain beat a deafening tattoo against metal, as if the very heavens sought to smother any chance of survival. Adrenaline blurred her vision to mere slits, focused purely on the tunnel ahead, foot never leaving the floor as the car roared desperately through the storm. How much longer could the old Subaru hold out at this breakneck pace? Would help somehow materialize? Or would the next twist in the road deliver them unto some fresh hell? Jenna bit back, screams clawing up her parched throat, refusing to give whatever nightmares trailed them the satisfaction. Her entire being narrowed to the singular purpose of fleeing the terrors born on this endless, rainy highway under starless skies. Somehow, impossibly, the barest outline of high ground emerged in the gloom ahead. Cresting the hill with a flying leap, the road dropped sharply away into black nothing. But for a split second, Jenna glimpsed headlights. Far below, the welcoming glow of civilization. With a sob of relief, she forced weary muscles to sustain this final push, following the descending path towards salvation. Only as houses and street lamps swam into view did she dare loosen her white-knuckle grip on the wheel, sobbing openly as panic finally released its claws. She had done it, survived the nightmare ride, and outrun the shadows on her tail. Collapsing lungs, dragged in greedy lungfuls of sweet, sweet oxygen tasting of freedom. It was over. They had made it. Too exhausted to consider the state of her crazed passenger, Jenna limped the final miles into town on rubbery legs. Civilization closed protectively around her battered car like the gentle embrace of family after a harrowing ordeal. At the first populated gas station, she limped to a pump on fumes and collapsed against the curb, fumbling again for her phone, only to discover it remained dead. Paramedics would be required to pry answers from her incoherent ramblings of monsters in the dark. As the dawn's first rosy rays crept over distant hills, Jenna allowed oblivion to pull her into its blissful nothingness, escaping for a time the lingering questions haunting her racing mind. When awareness returned, fuzzy colors swirled together in a haze that could not quite solidify into recognizable shapes. Jenna drifted on the periphery of consciousness, willing her mind to piece together where and why everything ached so fiercely. Slowly, sounds filtered through. Beeping monitors, muffled voices down a corridor, the squeak of shoes on vinyl flooring. A hospital then. Memories resurfaced in broken fragments, shadowy figures giving chase through pounding rain. Nora's blue eyes gone mad with what? Terror, possession. Jenna shuddered, regretting the return to cognition as questions arose with no answers in sight. One surfaced above the turmoil. Where was Nora now? Had the authorities been contacted? Prying heavy lids open revealed a basic private room cast in midday brightness. Filtering past half-closed blinds, her Subaru keys sat in a plastic dish on the side table. Some good Samaritan must have retrieved them. But what of the mysterious passenger whose presence plunged Jenna into nightmare? As if in response, the door swung open to admit a tall man, clutching a worn leather satchel. His neat buttoned down and khakis had an understated professionalism, crow's feet crinkling kindly at the corners of hazel eyes. Miss James, I'm Dr. Michaels from the County Mental Health Unit. I understand you've been through quite an ordeal. How are you feeling? Jenna shifted to sit up with a wince, probing for injuries beyond sore muscles. A bit battered but intact, it seems. Though I've been trying to piece together what really happened last night. Michaels pulled a rolling stool and notepad from his bag, clicking a pen. That's why I'm here. The authorities reported your case after finding you in hysterics at that gas station. We'd like to get to the bottom of any psychological trauma and ensure you're coping all right. Why don't you walk me through your account from the beginning? So Jenna recounted picking up the mysterious fare Nora at the deserted station and how the drive devolved into paranoia. Fueled panic, she struggled to make sense of the metamorphosis from empathy to survival instinct as Nora's story unleashed itself. Michaels listened without judgment, directing her occasionally to expand certain details. By the climax of her phantasmal pursuers closing in, however, unease crept into his clinical demeanor. Jenna, while trauma can manifest strangely, some elements here don't add up. Do you have any history of psychosis or delusions? Have you suffered head injuries lately? No, nothing like that, she insisted, confused. I know it sounds insane, but I remember it all so vividly. How do you explain Nora's bruises appearing from nowhere or her sudden superhuman strength? Have the police located her at all? Sighing, Michaels removed his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. That's just it. According to the officers who searched your vehicle, there's no evidence anyone besides yourself was ever in that car. No personal items, fingerprints, or signs of a struggle. They found you alone in the driver's seat, unconscious and unharmed, beyond fatigue and dehydration. You had driven yourself nearly 50 miles from where your call for help pinged a tower. Jenna felt the blood drain from her face. But Nora was real. I spoke to her. I felt her trying to. No, it can't be. Her voice rose in dismay, hands trembling to claw at tangled hair as pieces refused to fit. Michaels laid a steadying palm on her knee. I understand this is difficult to process. Traumatic events can play tricks on even the strongest minds, blurring reality. The mind seeks understanding through narrative, whether fact or fiction. For now, it's important you rest and avoid dwelling on these unsolved elements. Let's focus, instead, on your recovery and coping strategies going forward. Would medication or therapy be beneficial, in your view? Jenna nodded mutely, reeling from a truth that dismantled the foundations holding her fragile grasp on sanity intact. How much more could she trust of her own experiences and perceptions? That suffocating fear, with its inhuman shrieks and looming shadows, felt etched into her psyche like nightmare scenes, burned onto dream retinas. Yet according to this doctor, the climax of her terror ride existed only within fractured psyches, fighting to understand the inexplicable. Somehow that emptiness gaped even colder than the solid horrors Nora had summoned. At least within those lurked understanding and cause, however twisted. But to confront such vivid memories as pure delusion, born of fractured mind, that plunged her into an isolation more profound than any dark country road could render. Without trust in one's senses and cognition, what anchor remained from the grip of madness? In the coming days, Jenna accepted Michael's recommendations to meet regularly with a psychologist specialized in trauma. Medication dulled rattling nerves and coaxed fitful sleep, yet her nights remained haunted by visions just beyond conscious recall. Fragmented scenes materialized, blue eyes weeping tears of inky blackness, taloned hands sinking into soft flesh, and worst of all, that blood-curdling howl ringing out amid a downpour to curdle the soul. Each mooring brought more questions than answers. Had she truly driven that dark highway alone under some disassociated break with reality spawned by stress? And if so, what accounts for the eerily sentient quality of her memories depicting Nora? They seemed formed by external stimuli, not invented by psyche alone. Try as she might to rationalize mystery through therapy, her experiences retained a stubborn otherness that therapy could not permeate, nor medication blunt. At least by day, structure and routine provided anchors holding fast against the chaos seeping from her subconscious at night. Classes resumed, and Jenna threw herself into schoolwork with perhaps unwise zeal, returning late each night to her sparse apartment, too drained for anything but collapse. Sleep evaded voluntarily, yet her dreams inevitably overflowed once eyelids slid shut against volition. One night particularly, a fragment pierced even the haze of medication. Jenna found herself back on that desolate stretch of highway, alone in her sedan, under pouring rain. Headlights pierced the downpour to reveal nothing, no road, no tree line, only an endless void of falling water, dissolving the boundaries of reality. Then, from the emptiness emerged a figure at the periphery of vision, pale and wraith-like, spinning to focus on the apparition, brought only more questions. For it remained stubbornly just out of clear sight, no matter how swiftly she turned her head. that maddening flickering summoned terror in equal parts because its nature eluded comprehending. A shriek exploded so close to the car, it seemed to rustle strands of her own hair floating around a soaked face. Lunging up with a gasp, Jenna collided with the ceiling as her vehicle swerved violently, narrowly missing collision with an oncoming semi that blared angrily past. Somehow, orientation reasserted itself. She had fallen asleep at the wheel in her driveway, reliving nightmare behind closed eyes. Heart still racing. Hours later, when dawn crept through blinds, Jenna knew rest would not return so easily again. Something lingered in the shadows of her subconscious, insistent on resurrecting that night's terrors, however deeply buried. The call of madness waited patiently to swallow entirely a mind already fraying at the seams. Recovery stretched before Jenna like an endless highway, vanishing into fog. Yet each dawn brought her closer to reclaiming shattered certainty. Days blended into weeks of healing routine, classes, therapy, medication keeping chaos at bay, if only barely. Nights offered no such routine. However, continuing their campaign of fractured visions, bleeding reality into nightmare. On the cusp of June, warm days coaxed students outdoors to celebrate semester's end. Friends cajoled Jenna into an evening bonfire on campus, insisting fresh air and company could lift lingering shadows. She agreed reluctantly, craving normalcy, even as restless energy thrummed through limbs, still recovering full strength. Laughter and music carried for miles under a star-flecked sky, banishing darkness to the edge of flickering firelight. For a time, Jenna lost herself in dancing and jokes shared around the blaze. Warm cider and company soothed jagged nerves frayed by isolation, granting a reprieve from specters haunting her every thought. Gradually, tension drained from taut muscles poised for flight, replaced by tendrils of lightness foreign since that ill-fated ride request changed her world. Maybe healing wasn't impossible after all, with support of people who cared, who saw her for who she was, beyond delusions or damage. As embers dimmed to glowing coals and revelers departed in pairs or groups into the night, Jenna's companions urged her to accept a fellow's invite to stargaze on the quad. She hesitated. Anxious solitude might reawaken old demons, given too much silence. But seeing care and concern in their eyes strengthened her resolve. She would not become a prisoner to fear stealing all joy and connection. With a determined smile and wave, Jenna bade them farewell and followed her admirer into warm darkness. Their stroll began pleasantly enough, pointed discussions of constellations and astrophysics, lifting scholarly interest above any charged undercurrent. Jenna relaxed into the ease of academic debate void of expectation, savoring this gesture of normal young friendship. As they approached an open field beyond campus lamps, however, her companion veered with intention towards looming shadows. Alarm fluttered Jenna's breath, but she quashed irrational panic. She refused to cower from mere darkness any longer. Glancing overhead revealed a vivid tapestry of stars granting this spot unmatched clarity, and her company seemed earnest in innocent intentions. Yet as long fingers curled around her wrist to draw her into blackness beneath a massive oak, instincts screamed flight where rationality hesitated. In one fluid motion, she twisted her arm free and leapt backwards, heart launching into her throat. "I'm sorry. I should get back," she stammered, backing hurriedly towards lights in the distance like a wary animal. Raw fear flashed across his face, morphing swiftly to annoyance, as if dealing with an irrational child. Jenna, stop. We were just talking. You're letting stupid delusions run your life. I'm trying to help. He stepped forward, features losing amiability in shadows beneath the boughs. She continued stepping back rapidly. Fight or flight, overriding reason, holding her rooted to analyze mounting danger. Please, just leave me alone. I need to go. A guttural noise erupted from his throat as patience snapped, long legs eating up space between them in an instant. He shot out, grasping hands to trap her flailing arms in an iron grip. Jenna screamed, thrashing wildly against his vice grip as his face contorted with wrathful snarls. You ungrateful bitch. After all I've done trying to comfort your crazy ass, no man will ever want a psycho like you. With that, he swung her bodily around to slam her spine against rough bark, pinning her in place. Hot breath puffed against her cheek, rank with alcohol, fueling unchecked malevolence. Jenna bucked and kicked uselessly, pure primal terror, drilling every ounce of strength from her bones already drained. Fingernails raked fruitlessly down leather jacket as hands closed tighter around delicate wrists, bones grinding under strain. Black spots swarmed her vision. From lack of oxygen, only fueling hysteria, coursing like liquid fire through veins. In her final moments of consciousness, a bellowing howl rent the night, coming not from her own cracking vocal cords, but from impossibly close. Impact jarred Jenna from unconsciousness, releasing her limp form to collapse in a heap. Disoriented, she cautiously opened clouded eyes to a scene from hell itself. Two massive shadowy beasts rolled in a snarling tangle of fur, talons, and gnashing fangs. Her assailant shrieked, unholy sounds mingling agony with rage, as claws rent flesh in crimson arcs. Though darkness veiled details, one beast dwarfed the other by at least 100 pounds of corded muscle and night, lard pelt. Against all sense and reason, recognition sliced through Jenna's paralysis. This hulking creature keeping her would-be rapist-occupied resembled too greatly the malformed beast from her mental asylum, the one Nora claimed stalked their farm. As her savior locked powerful jaws around a throat to still its tormentor, once and for all. Sightless, head swung toward her prone form, illuminated somehow by a merciless glow within bottomless black eyes, boring into her soul. A keening wail pealed from that slavering maw, suffusing her mind, not with primal violence, but with an ancient sentience beyond mortal comprehension. It spoke of shadows and mysteries man was never meant to glimpse, carrying unknowable purpose and wisdom that turned reason to ashes on the tongue. Through that cry resounded a final message before beast and corpse dissolved into night like mist. You were not meant to forget. The dark remembers, and so should you. A piercingly human scream tore Jenna's ravaged throat as unconsciousness dragged her under once more, her psyche abandoning ship against unfolding impossibilities. When awareness stirred again, white walls closed around her wearied form. Paramedics related finding her half dead in a pool of blood, not her own, raving about beasts and midnight battles. Officers searched, but located nothing to corroborate her crazed claims beyond torn clothes and offensive wounds. Doctors put it down to shock and remnants of trauma, distorting reality further, upping medications accordingly. As weeks passed in that sterile cage, Jenna clung to the hope her latest ordeal had been another fiction, forged by fractured mind. How else to explain vanishing carnage and no trace of mysterious savior among scrapes of reality? Despite doctors' reassurances, however, something deeper within refused. Forget that unholy howl haunting her dreams more vividly than even the assault itself. A sentience beyond mortal ken had recognized and communicated with her own torn psyche, leaving an indelible mark that defied erasure, no matter the drugs coursing her veins. Some memories could not be medicated or therapized away, for they had transcended the boundaries of what science deemed plausible. Jenna knew, with gut-wrenching certainty, carved to her core that night, under twisted boughs, that nameless terrors prowled places daylight and reason dared not tread. No therapy nor drug regime could shield a mind once cracked open to glimpse what lay beyond the rational, the normal, the sane. The shadow's long-forgotten message had been delivered, and she could deny its import, no more than forget its visceral cry, seared to her very soul. Discharged once physically healed, Jenna embarked on the long voyage home, more damaged and yet stronger for bearing scars no therapist might hope to penetrate or interpret. Survival had uncovered reservoirs of resilience within, yet peace remained elusive as long as mysteries lingered without answers or justice. Darkness held dominion over so many lingering unknowns, yet its hold over her psyche had loosened with that savage howl, releasing shackles of denial. Whatever lay beyond the veil, she now walked this earth with eyes open to perceive more than daylight afforded. And somewhere deep in nighted woods and souls untouched by reason's light, kindred eyes of onyx still watched and waited. Keeping ancient vigils man was not meant to share, till destiny's call rang clear once more. For Jenna knew, with certainty chilling as that pre-dawn breeze, this was only the beginning. Story 2. Cold droplets smattered Michael's windshield as he sped down the darkened country road. In less than an hour, his shift would end, and with it this dreary night. Glancing at the glowing LYFT app, he sighed at the lack of requests. Most folks had the good sense to stay indoors on nights like these. Up ahead, a solitary streetlight flickered feebly, like the last ember in a dying fire. Its pale glow illuminated little more than a swirling mist that clung to the asphalt. But just beyond the circle of light, a solitary figure emerged from the fog. Michael slowed as icy tendrils curled around his heart. Was that? He approached cautiously and peered through the rain, spattered glass. For an instant, the shadowy form peered right back, its face obscured in the half-light. Then it vanished as quickly as it had appeared, rubbing his eyes. Michael wondered if exhaustion was playing tricks on him now. He was just about to drive on when a notification pinged on his phone. A new fare, just outside of town. Intrigued and unsettled in equal measure, Michael turned his Subaru onto the shoulder and followed GPS coordinates into the misty void. Trees loomed like silent sentinels on either side of the road. Their gnarled branches clawed at the roiling sky. After several minutes of eerie isolation, he spotted a lone figure, standing motionless at the roadside ahead. Michael pulled over and hit the unlock button, his breath misting the inside of the windows. But as he scanned the dense fog, only darkness greeted him. Had the person changed their mind? He was on the verge of canceling when a disembodied whisper drifted from the back seat. "Take me to the old cemetery." Michael screamed and vaulted from the driver's seat, fumbling for his phone with trembling hands. But when he whirled around, the back seat lay empty as a tomb. Impossible, yet the voice still echoed clearly in his ears, as if spoken right behind him. Another shiver racked his frame that had nothing to do with the chill. Against every instinct screaming within, some invisible force seemed to compel his actions. With dread pooling in his stomach, Michael climbed back in and pulled up directions to the local graveyard. The half-mile stretch dragged on as Michael White knuckled the steering wheel, jumping at every creak and groan of his Subaru. Finally, rusted, wrought-iron gates loomed ahead. The words Hillview Cemetery, barely legible on their flaking arch. He pulled to a stop just within the entrance and killed the engine, listening hard over the patter of rain. Nothing but the wind's mournful howl broke the heavy silence. Drawing a steadying breath, Michael stepped out into the night. Ancient headstones leaned at haphazard angles all around, their weathered inscriptions long lost to time. His flashlight beam danced over mossy statuary and crosses, barely cutting through the thinky gloom. "Hello," he called hesitantly. I'm here for pickup. Where are you?" Only the wind answered. Michael was just starting to think he'd lost his mind completely when behind him, a sepulchral voice breathed, "Over here." He whirled with a yelp to see nothing, but his light fell upon a freshly dug plot of earth, a short distance away. Half buried amongst the overturned soil was a wooden marker, and even in the uncertain glow, he could make out 3 words carved into its cheap surface. Michael J. Fleming. The breath froze in Michael's lungs, his legs suddenly too weak to support him. He collapsed to his knees in the damp moss as an unspeakable terror gripped his heart. For carved upon the very soil he now clutched was indisputable proof. This gravite bore his own name. Michael woke with a start, tangled in damp sheets, soaked through with fevered sweat. The same nightmare had plagued his restless sleep every night since that fateful ride. Standing helpless before an open grave, the grasping fingers of death himself, rising to drag him down into an eternity of suffocating black. With a groan, he rolled from bed, his aching muscles protesting every movement. Through the murky pre-dawn, he could just make out his haggard reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles hung heavy under sunken eyes that seemed weary beyond their years, as if some vital essence had been leached away, leaving only a hollow shell of the man he once was. Grasping the edges of the sink, Michael steadied himself against a fresh wave of nausea. Flashes of memory assailed him, the phantom passenger's disembodied rasps, whispering ominous threats in his ears each time he closed his eyes. He splashed cold water onto his gaunt face, hoping its sting might jolt some clarity back into his fractured mind. But all it served to do was deepen the sense of unreality haunting his every waking moment. With trembling hands, Michael fumbled 2 pills from the bottle on the sink. Perhaps a higher dose this time would grant him respite from these relentless visions. As he swallowed the tablets, his bleary eyes fell upon the calendar hung crooked on the back of the bathroom door. Its dates crossed off haphazardly over the past week. October 22nd. That couldn't be right. According to the calendar, only a few days had passed since that ill-fated ride. But Michael was certain it had been over a fortnight, trapped within this purgatory of endless nightmares. Time seemed to blur and warp around the edges of his fracturing mind, like the misted graveyard where this waking nightmare had begun. After forcing down a lukewarm cup of coffee, Michael knew returning to his bed was pointless. Rest would not find him there. He needed answers, needed to understand how his world had been so thoroughly upended. Grabbing his jacket and a flashlight, Michael left his apartment at the first gray light of dawn. The gravel lot outside Hillview Cemetery came into view. Down the winding country lane, a dreary constant looming at the edge of his consciousness these past weeks. But for the first time since that night, Michael was determined to face whatever dread lay buried within its twisting paths. Unlocking the creaking gates, he steeled himself for whatever revelations might be unearthed. Making his way through the markers, Michael paused beside the still fresh mound of earth, beneath the crude wooden cross bearing his name. Kneeling, he ran his fingers through the soil as if searching for answers buried in its loamy depths. But all that met his questing touch was cold, damp clay clinging under broken nails. A glint of metal in the undergrowth nearby caught his eye. Brushing away dead leaves and brambles revealed a patch of rusted iron bars set flush into the earth. With effort, Michael pried back a section of aging soil to fully unveil its purpose, an exposed section of fencing, demarcating a much larger plot beneath. Squinting in the pale half-light, he spied a weathered engraving set low into the rusted metal. Brushing away centuries of grime and lichen, revealed words barely legible. Sacred ground, the hill circle. Leave all ye who enter here. The name sent a chill through Michael's core that had nothing to do with the biting dawn breeze. Some long-buried instinct seemed to recognize and recoil from its sinister implications. Yet his rational mind, long strained past the breaking point, needed understanding more than self-preservation. Rising on trembling legs, Michael made his way to the gates with new resolve burning in sunken eyes. Answers would be found, no matter the cost. Hours spent combing musty archives and bureaucratic records yielded more questions than answers. The Hill Circle held no verifiable presence in local history, outside whispers of campfire tales and fevered imaginings of eccentric locals. But deep within folders, yellowed with age, Michael uncovered a single scrap of fact, an old land deed from the town's founding, mentioning the property's original residents, a sect who erected strange symbols beneath a gnarled oak at the center of the grove they called home. And etched in spidery script at the deed's base was a signature. I, Fleming, leader and proprietor. The surname slammed into Michael with the force of a locomotive, stealing the breath from his lungs. Impossible. Yet, here was proof his family had lived upon and possibly led these peoples from the very first. What dark rites or rituals had been performed within those hallowed grounds, and what role had his own bloodline played in their mysteries? His wavering grip on reality was shaken further, pieces clicking into a grim understanding far beyond his comprehension. All he knew was an innate sense of doom and the phantom laughs, whispering in his ears, urging him towards some terrible revelation at the graveyard come nightfall. Against every survival instinct screaming within, Michael knew he had no choice but to return. Darkness swathed the cemetery grounds by the time Michael's Subaru growled its way up the winding lane. As he stepped from the vehicle, shadows seemed to deepen and congeal at the edges of his flashlight's dim beam. An unnatural stillness hung heavy in the mist, shrouded air, as if all living things feared to stir, lest some nameless threat be alerted. Michael paused for a long moment, heart hammering against his ribs, fit to crack them. Going back was madness. Every fiber of his being cried out. Yet still he went on, drawn by some driving need to purge the specters haunting his mind, if only through facing the terror that spawned them. Rounding a bend between crumbling obelisks, The gnarled oak's hulking branches came into view, silhouetted against the roiling sky. There, almost obscured by the shadows, it stood. A lone figure awaited beneath the spreading boughs. Michael froze, every muscle locking in fear, as twin eyes glowed with ethereal fire. From the darkness beneath its cowl, a dry, rasping chuckle escaped its shrouded form. At last, wayward son, you return to your fate. Tonight, we finish what was begun so long ago in this sacred grove. Trembling violently, Michael found his voice. Who are you? What do you want from me? Two sickly hands emerged to lower its hood, revealing decayed flesh sloughing from bone and an empty socket weeping thick ichor. Its jaw unhinged in an unnatural grin, a single word escaping in a noxious gust. Blood. Blood. Michael stumbled back with a choked cry, crashing through brittle undergrowth as he scrambled in helpless panic. The ghoul's rattling laughter followed, echoing through the silent grove. Flee all you wish, fleshling. Your debt is owed and must be paid. Gasping for breath, Michael hauled himself upright against a tilting headstone. His flashlight rolled uselessly through damp leaves, its feeble glow swallowed by the encroaching night. All was silent, but for the pounding of blood in his ears and his own ragged sobs. How had this become his life? Trapped in a waking nightmare, stalked by demons, both seen and unseen. As Michael sank to his knees in despair, a glint caught his eye from beneath a gnarled root. Clasping shaking hands around cold metal, he withdrew an old leather-bound journal, long buried in the damp earth. With care, he thumbed open its moldy pages to find faded script within. October 31st, 1923. The ritual is prepared. At midnight's turning, the circle will be complete, our coven's power at its peak to summon the old gods from the abyss. A Fleming must fulfill the vestment as is tradition, and young Abraham has been chosen for the sacrifice. May his blood allow our communion. Michael stared in horror, the pieces clicking into a grim understanding. He was a descendant of these devil worshippers, this cult that conducted unspeakable rites beneath the gnarled oak for who knows how many generations. And now, some vengeful spirit sought to force him into fulfilling the same dark prophecy that had doomed his ancestor all those years ago. Slamming the journal shut, Michael knew only one course remained. He had to break this cycle once and for all, and deny whatever malevolent force sought to claim his soul. Struggling to his feet, he gathered his fraying courage and marched resolutely into the mist, shrouded grove, coming to a stop before the cowled figure, silently awaiting him. Enough of your lies and tricks. Demon, I know who you truly are. The vengeful spirit of Abraham Fleming, cursed to walk these grounds for your sins. Well, I will not be your sacrifice. My family's debt died with that journal in the earth. Now be gone from this place. A terrible screech rent the air as the wraith reared up to its full, swaying height. Two glowing orbs glared down at the trembling man from its featureless face. Foolish mortal, I am but a messenger. The old gods hunger, and your line owes a debt in blood. I will feast on your soul as penance for their slights against us. Taloned hands shot forward to encircle Michael's throat as an unearthly wind kicked up, whipping capes of mist through the grove, choking and gripping at icy flesh. Michael's vision began to tunnel as consciousness fled. in his fading minds. He saw past the moldering corpse to the true horror residing within, a mass of roiling shadows given vague form, gnashing jaws and clutching talons, hungering to be sated. With his final reserves of strength, Michael wrenched free a jagged rock embedded in the soil and slammed it into the apparition's remaining eye with a wet crunch. A bone-chilling shriek rent the air as the wraith reeled back, form dissipating on the frigid wind. Before it could fully dissipate, Michael grasped the foul journal and thrust it into the flames, already licking at unraveling cloth. "Begone," he roared over the rising inferno, "and let your masters know. This land and my kin's debts are settled. We are free." The last remnants of Abraham Fleming were consumed on the blaze, his tortured wails fading to nothing on the wind. Michael fell to his knees amidst the ashes, shuddering with spent emotion and exertion. At last, it was over. The torment, the nightmares, the phantom voices haunting his every waking moment. As dawn's first rays breached the horizon, Michael made his weary way from that place of dark reminders. A new path in life now opened before him, free from the burdens and sins of the past. Only time would tell what mysteries still lurked in the mists of Hillview Cemetery. But for now, he had found peace. His destiny was his own to shape, and the future bright with promise. Story 3. The taillights of my battered Toyota flickered red against the veil of fog engulfing the empty country road. Another late night, another few dollars waiting to be earned ferrying passengers through the rural outskirts. But this summons lied well past the usual routes, luring me down winding paths into the gloom. As I neared the address, coordinates glowing green on my phone's map, instincts raised alarms I dismissed as exhaustion playing tricks. Nothing appeared through the bleary windows except a yawning sea of white. A lone gravel driveway emerged and I slowed, peering uselessly into the mists. A dim shape emerged, an aged man attired in crisp black suit and wide-brimmed hat obscuring his face. He glided toward the open rear door like a spectral vision and folded smoothly inside without a word. I glanced over my shoulder, unsettled by this passenger's silence and the obscurity of his features. "Evening," I greeted, hoping conversation might lighten the mood. "Mr. Black will suffice," came his gravelly rasp, tinged with an accent of times long past. His hands remained folded neatly in his lap, hat shadowing his expression. "Thank you for agreeing to this ride into the unknown, John." An icy shiver traced my spine at the familiar address. "How did you know my name?" No response came, only the whisper of the tires finding purchase on wet pavement as I accelerated away from that grim starting point. The moonless sky offered no answers, only deepening the oppressive murk pressing in on all sides. No place seemed real in this vale. "I've come to show you a place few living eyes have seen in over a century," Mr. Black intoned, as if reading my unease. "A manor that dwells within these woods, hiding its tragic history from prying modern eyes. But some legends deserve remembrance, wouldn't you agree?" His soft lilt carried notes of warning beneath the polite terms. I fought to keep my breathing even, fighting foolish notions that this creature intended harm. My job was to deliver passengers safely. Nothing more, so I turned my attention to navigating the dim labyrinth of switchbacks emerging from sight, just ahead of the headlights. Once, grand festivities lit these darkened halls. Mr. Black continued without prompting, swirling a hand as if reminiscing happier times, decadent balls, where the wealthy of the county gathered to forget their cares amid opulence and merriment. But behind gilded smiles lurked darker desires, and in this place, sins drowned virtue until none remained. His descriptions summoned shadowy visions, dancing at the edges of sight, gleaming costumes and flushed faces blurred behind fluttering silks, flickering below candlelit chandeliers, descending into madness. I swallowed hard, peering into the gray swirls for any clue to our location, yet finding none in the shapeless void. Then the curse arrived, as all curses do, to punish man's hubris and excess. Mr. Black intoned softly. A vengeful spirit latched onto this family, whose last remaining heir slipped deeper into depravity, abandoning sanity and compassion. Death stalked these halls in twisted masquerades, stealing life in imaginative torments until none were left to tell the tale. His tales continued weaving a tapestry of past splendors, decaying into darker realms, hinting at violence and otherworldly vendettas, dragging the manor's inhabitants down into the mires. Gradually, his low lilt took on an increasing edge, like sharpened blades, glinting hungrily in the moonlight. Or was that yet more tricks of my mind fragmenting in this surreal ride? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, fighting the impulse to demand we turn back at once. Yet what direction even was back in this drowning fog? No landmarks appeared, not even the faintest hint of civilization to break the swirling gray sameness stretching endlessly in all directions. My phone lay cradled in the cup holder, waiting for a signal that never emerged from whatever force blocked modern reach within these woods. I was alone with this specter of a man, and his grim histories foreshadowing some climax yet to be revealed, stranded amid his fabricated curses and vendettas seeping into my mind. Death rules supreme, where life once flourished so proudly, Mr. Black intoned, clenching a fist as if strangling unseen throats. Their decaying sins still fester in this poisoned earth, curdling the mists to shield their miserable graves from disturbance. None may escape what they have wrought, unless a new soul takes their place. An involuntary shudder racked me at the insinuation in his final words. I fought to steady my breathing, rationalizing it as nonsense. After all, ghosts and curses existed only in campfire tales, meant to thrill naive hearts, not the real world. My job wasn't to entertain such irrational chatter, but find our true destination and be done with this ominous charade. Sir, while I appreciate the story, night is fading and I must return home, I interjected, proud of keeping unease from my tone. Perhaps you could guide me to your residence, so I might fulfill my duties and be on my way. Only silence answered, seeming to smother the vehicle despite my heater valiantly battling the seeping chill. I tapped anxious fingers on the steering wheel, peering into the rolling mist for any sign of life, yet all remained an impenetrable gray void. There is only one destination tonight, brave John, Mr. Black intoned like a death knell. Behind me, the manor looms ahead to reveal its enduring nightmares, and you shall see what lies beyond this life. Panic struck like ice in my veins. Yet outwardly, I took slow, measured breaths as taught in crises, assessing logic over panic. My passenger clearly intended to unnerve with his tales, yet posed no physical threat, as proven by his motionless silhouette. The fog obscured landmarks, not threats. I simply needed to remain calm and steady the course, however ambiguous, until finding an opportunity to put an end to this charade. Headlights pierced the mists, revealing not the familiar structures of civilization, but a towering form emerging from the fog. I drew a muted gasp, taken aback by the ancient architecture rearing impossibly high and wide, dwarfing surrounding treetops in spectral silhouette. Bleak windows gaped blackly, features eroded by centuries wearing down grandeur into decay. This was no ordinary residence, but a decaying mansion fit for the setting of Gothic epics. Its shadow engulfed the car, extinguishing even the uncertain protection of modern comforts. I was drawn inexorably into its crumbling maw. Past the point of rationality, only whatever truth or terror lay within could end this haunted ride. Welcome to Delvo Minor, the site of countless sins and sufferings, buried but never resting, Mr. Black intoned behind me with terrible delight. Now comes the part where you play your role, my friend, in unraveling mysteries better left chained to moldering crypts. His final words slithered through me, icy talons clutching my spine, as the manor loomed vast and malign through veil of ghosts. I braked before its foundations, final barrier against the nightmares seeping through its rotting walls. Whatever awaited inside, I alone must now face. Delvo Minor's sheer facade towered spectral through swirling veils, an obsidian stain upon the woods. I dared not climb those crumbling stairs into whatever netherworld awaited within its decaying ribcage. Yet my passenger's awful words echoed chilling finality. Whatever fate befell this place was meant for me. Last sacrifice to eternal griefs seeping from the very soil. Turning, frantic pleas died upon seeing only empty space, where Mr. Black had sat motionless as carved granite. His disappearance shook the last remnants of logic clinging precariously to frayed edges of reason. I was sealed in this car, amid fog-shrouded pines, alone but for nameless presences, stalking the vaporous borders between realms. A scraping screech jolted me, locking mechanisms rattling shut one by one, imprisoning me in this capsule of modern technology, suddenly as antiquated as the manor towering before like a death shroud. Chilling laughter whispered through the cabin, ephemeral and cutting as razor-wire slicing tender flesh. My passenger had ensured this ride ended only when the spirits willed their due. Panicked fingers flew over dials and buttons to no avail. The electronic beast remained mute, engine idle dead, as if lungs choked by decaying hands from the soil below. I was trapped in a bubble suspended between worlds, neither living nor departed, but awaiting whatever carta would be claimed. Furling tendrils of dread crept through veins, numbing limbs as frigid waters seep. Some rational fragment whispered to flee the scene at once before worse terrors emerged. Yet my traitor eyes were magnetized, helplessly, to that looming sentinel. What horrors festered within its aging marrow after centuries absorbing misery? How many stolen souls offered final screams, echoing down dilapidated halls before being swallowed into the void? Headlights penetrated only a few feeble paces into obsidian vapors, wreathing the manor's foundations. I knew beyond any doubt venturing farther meant threading through Stygian labyrinths, where none returned with their sanity or life. Intact, but remaining sealed inside, offered no salvation, only becoming another lost soul, bound within these encroaching depths. Resigning my fate, I cast one last lingering gaze upon the soothing blue glow of my phone, locked securely away in this mechanized casket. If any remnants of John were to endure outside these shrouded grounds, perhaps fragments clung to its memory banks to reconstruct events, defying comprehension. With a shuddering exhalation, I shoved open the door, joining the misty veil. Moist tendrils stroked chill fingers across bare skin, seeping into pores and lungs with cadaverous fingers. No shapes emerged through swirling atoms, only a formless gray void, pressing closer with each uncertain step, dragging leaden feet forward. Somewhere beyond licked the promise of answers or ends. I could only pray, confronting terrors granted escape before being subsumed entirely. After an eternity drifting as in a nightmare, pale stone loomed suddenly through the mists. Weathered steps rose beneath boots, crunching deadened leaves and scrub, creaking mournfully under my weight as if protesting intrusion. Jagged columns towered on either side, ribbons of ivy clawing greedily up crumbling surfaces as if trying to sink the estate back into the earth entirely. I stood before splintered double doors taller than 3 men, handles rusted solid with disuse. Shoving against the warped barrier yielded only faint scraping before stopping completely. Panic swelled, seeing no other entry. Had this voyage ended before revelations could be made, leaving me trapped eternally outside? Frantic fingers raked along cracks, probing for any vulnerability, admitting entry. A sliver shifted, then another, until a fissure split the door wide enough for escape. I slipped through onto a decaying marble foyer, swarming with shadows, not entirely cast by columns barely sustaining a vaulted ceiling. My footsteps echoed in vast emptiness as I picked my way through debris choking the entrance hall. Shattered vases and portraits leaning crazily against peeling walls told of some violent upheaval defacing former glory. A sweeping staircase split the hall ahead, branches rising into deeper gloom, unfathomable by feeble flashlight beam. Some sixth sense prickled the nape of my neck, sensing eyes upon me from beyond visible plains. I whirled, but saw only swirling mists, blurring boundaries between crumbling pillars. Had those swaying silhouettes, glimpsed moments ago, truly been drapes, rippling in ethereal breeze, or veiled figures, watching my progression hungrily? The chill intensified, seeping into marrow as if entities prowled hungrily just beyond perception. Their vessel had long decayed, yet presences endured tethered to sins staining every timber and stone. I was an alien thing, disturbing ancient domains, better left undisturbed, and punishments would come for those who pry into mournful netherworlds, never meant for mortal perceptions. A creaking moan rumbled up through souls, as if the estate protested my violation. I froze, nerve-ending screaming flight through the mist to escape whatever roused in dark corners, stirred by my intrusion. But those double doors had sealed fast once more behind me, ensuring this pilgrimage ended only when spirits deemed enough torment extracted from my arrogance. There was no escape but forward and confronting whatever terrors festered in this place of sorrow. Firstborn apprehension guided my footsteps up left branch of the stair, each protesting groan sending icicles stabbing through my flesh. Flickering torchlight wavered down unnaturally long corridors branching off like calcified veins, glimpsing ornate furnishings melting into decay. Cobwebbed portraits leered down from smoky heights, subjects twisted into visages of agony and madness. Wind rushed frigid fingers down my neck. Ghostly wisps, sighing names I dared not repeat lest summoning vengeful entities. Scuttling sounds scrabbled just out of sight within tattered wallpaper, peeling back layer by putrid layer, the air curdled thick with misery, stewing for centuries, cloying lungs with reeking essence of torment. My light swept, shaking across a nearest portrait, and two jet orbs stared back intensely from a feminine face, crumpled into rictus. I stumbled backward with a yelp that was answered by mocking giggles, echoing down the corridor of souls. Terror seized my paralyzing limbs as presence crept nearer, eager to claim its due after so long prowling these barren halls. I wrenched around, boots slipping on treacherous carpet devoured by mold as those gibbering chortles swelled behind with eager malice. There was nothing but my panicked imaginings festering in this charnel abyss, seeping poison into my mind, heart pounding faster than thoughts. I lurched upstairs once more to escape those relentless cackles, growing louder with each landing gained. The decaying third floor flickered at the periphery of light, studded with openings like many feral mouths. My chest seized, clawing for breath as giggling hissed from yawning doorways on either side. Closing rank, feeble light wavered across moldering papers, drifting a rotting office, and froze upon an emaciated form half emerged from a tattered armchair. It stared vacantly ahead with sunken sockets, parchment skin drawn so tightly over jutting bones. Any features were indistinguishable. Threadbare attire clung in shreds, as if the occupant wasted away clutching desperation in unchanging rigor. I choked back, an anguished sob at this fate, awaiting myself. Should spirits claim their due before salvation could be found? Clutching that feeble light for protection, however symbolic, I inched toward a landing, promising escape from this tomb. The revenant army harried steps, braying laughter, ringing so near as if swarming just beyond sight. Terror spurred leaden feet, fighting through suctioning carpet, praying for liberation as pipes screamed protests through moldering timbers. A roar deafened senses. The cacophony ceased as if sliced by scythe. I dared hope salvation arrived, but light revealed only a splintered attic hatch, yawning directly overhead. Wind howled through breaches in the roof. Caressing decaying remains scattered across floorboards. My light swept desperately for exit, yet found only shadows writhing at the threshold of perception. Trapped within this mausoleum, prey to vengeful spirits denied rest. An anguished wail tore from my constricting throat. Terror and sorrow curdled tears, streaking grimy cheeks as shuffling steps skittered nearer from all sides, closing for the kill. I backed against a rotting wall, light quaking across the threshold, revealing only swirling vapor flecked with dancing ash. There was nothing left, no escape, only surrendering to fates inflicted upon this place so long ago. I slid, shaking to the floor, eyes squeezing shut against phantoms, materializing through the fog to drag me screaming into the eternal night. A soft laugh ghosted my ear, promising torments beyond torment for my arrogance, defiling sacred grounds. I moaned, curling into a ball awaiting the end as vengeful spirits poised talons to claim their due. My light guttered and died, plunging the attic into an abyss darker than forgotten tombs. Creaks and shuffles echoed through the blackness, drawing nearer with hungry intent. I clutched knees tightly, prayers spilling uselessly into the void, for deliverance from ghastly fates seeping through every board. A breath ghosted my nape, colder than Arctic winds. Icy claws caressed cheeks with deceptively gentle fingers, tracing trails slowly toward gaping mouth, ready to receive my final pleas. Blackness swarmed senses, numbing the last fragility of hope as vengeful entity prepared violation of body and soul for crimes against hallowed ground. Please, I begged through tearing sobs. I meant no harm, only to understand. A cruel laugh whispered all too near my ear. You understand nothing, mortal, and never shall. Our truths are forever chained to these walls, eternally mourning sins, carving our mortal bones. Your kind desecrated what was ours, so now you repay the debt. Its frigid breath froze my final pleas. Icy talons gripped my shoulders, dragging me flailing through the mausoleum of souls. Their roars deafened, pleading for the spirit's stolen peace. Vengeful chorus, relishing another sacrifice, dragged down into the misters. Darkness swallowed my terrified screams as entity dragged me deeper into the eternal nightmare. My eyes snapped open to dim flickering. An oil lantern swung precariously overhead, sputtering against the gloom. I lay tangled in mildewed tapestries, lungs heaving for breath against crushing weight upon chest. Phantoms prowled at shadows' edges, yet kept distance, circling hungrily but waiting for a sign. Slowly, panic's edges frayed, granting fragments of clarity. I was still alive, still trapped within this decaying cyst, but alive nonetheless. The spirits, tormented through madness and illusion rather than physical harm, desiring prey broken before being absorbed. As long as flickerings of hope and reason endured, their grasps could be denied. With trembling limbs, I pushed upright against splintering floorboards. Lanterns swung gently along the threshold, path illuminated through gathering mist. They beckoned wordlessly toward one destination, final confrontation with truth, bound too long in these rotting foundations. My limbs shook violently, yet feet found purchase, guided by some inner compulsion toward revelation. Down crumbling stairs, I staggered, lanterns swaying before, like corpse candles. Chambers peeled back, fractured memories through shifting shadows. There, a masquerade danced to heights of depravity, drowning all compassion. Here, specters glided down colonnades, longing for touch to warm frigid bones. Their histories seeped from every crack and fissure, souls imprinted onto the very essence of this decaying carcass. The lantern slowed before a gaping maw where double doors once stood proudly. Icy fingers traced my spine, yet feet dragged me relentlessly into widening jaws. Musty air choked lungs with centuries of anguish and betrayal, curdling the very foundation. This was the heart of suffering. Secrets clinging too long to moldering skeletons of the past. My light swept, decaying splendors fading into the miasma. Gilded furnishings buckled under clinging vines, portraits leering madly into the void. Shattered statuary lay strewn like broken lives, remnants of lavish celebrations, where virtue bled out amongst hedonism's perfumed masks. Darkness, obscured secrets, locked too long in these claustrophobic halls. Yet final answers could no longer be denied. A drafty balcony extended from crumbling walls, gazing out into swirling ether. I approached cautiously, half expecting taloned hands to seize my ankles and drag me shrieking into the gray. Instead, lantern light illuminated a small wooden door, fitted discreetly in the slats. Rusted hinges protested my touch, swinging inward stiffly to reveal spiraling stone steps, corkscrewing into nether realms. Down, I descended, farther into foundations bearing untold burdens. Frigid damp seeped into flesh and soul alike, whispers echoing up from cavernous pits, delving into the earth's cold organs. My light fell upon a crypt, dusty flagstones, scattered with shriveled pine caskets, crumbling under the weight of eternity. All lay broken and empty, save one. With shaking hands, I dragged squealing hinges wide enough to spill lantern glow within. Dust motes swirled thick, drifting lazily through the sarcophagus' gaping maw. Bones lay scattered in disarray, yet one skull lay propped at an angle. Sunken eyes trained unblinkingly upon my quaking form. Yellowed parchment lay crumpled in clenched fingers, scribed text flickering at the lantern's edge. My fingers pried loose, those brittle pages rasping against calcified digits, unwilling to relinquish secrets chained so long, squinting against faded script, slithering sense into the abyss. Fractured verses began materializing from the murk. Our sins condemn this profaned land, where virtues drowned, 'neath greed and vice. Now vengeful wraiths prowl decaying halls, guarding cursed histories with wrathful eyes. None shall disturb these hallowed crypts, where bones pay penance for debauched lives. Torments eternal shall spirits inflict upon all trespassing beyond these staves. Our truths remain entombed with rotting frames, memories forever chained to crumbling stone. None shall escape, damnation staining these graves, unless a new soul takes our wretched thrones. Chilling comprehensions seep through my numbed form. This was no accidental demise, but a twisted vengeance enacted upon a debased line, steeped in corruption and sins poisoning the very earth. Their monstrous actions branded a curse, ensuring eternal punishment upon these profaned grounds, and any intruders foolish to pry into the mires. A creak pierced the dripping tomb, lantern light falling upon secrets never meant for living eyes. I lurched around to behold a decaying presence materializing through billowing mist. Pale features twisting into rictus grinning. Maliciously, its clammy grip seized my throat, dragging me screaming into the yawning sarcophagus as spirits reclaimed their forfeited throne. The lantern guttered out, plunging tomb and prophecy into eternal night. My terrified screams were answered by cackling choruses, echoing up through foundations, relishing another soul dragged down into torment. Delvo Manor accepted its due, cursed grounds, securing vengeance upon all trespassing beyond stone and vine. For in this place, sins and sufferings were forever entombed.